As chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, I spent the last 2 years exposing the Biden administration's sabotage of our border and the policies that kept America safe. I saw firsthand their willful refusal to protect this country. Under the guise of foreign aid, USAID has been an unapologetic front for a far-left agenda. It has become self-evident there weren't a handful of foolish policies, but rather a coordinated strategy of radical, idiotic, and often anti-American priorities. Idiotic, you say? Millions to teach Moroccans how to make pottery? The Moroccans were making pottery before we were a country. This entire debate today and the crocodile tears from Democrats just goes to show what's wrong with this town. Not a single Democrat I've heard has expressed dismay at the many examples of crazy, wasteful spending. I'd like to remind the committee that President Kennedy unilaterally created USAID through an executive order in 1961. Yet the President Trump, orders a momentary pause after winning a mandate for reform, and Democrats cry, "Constitutional crisis." This is after 4 years of reckless spending and unrepentant lawlessness from the Biden administration.
I would remind everybody that Ebola response has been restored 250,000 through IOM, 1.5 million through UNICEF, another 250,000 IRFC, and others. The list goes on. And we should be supporting the correct programs. Uganda was brought up, and I would say, as an example there was a program, $5.5 million for promoting LGBT acceptance in Uganda. That is not life-saving, and that's not combating Ebola. Gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Green, is now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Mass, and I appreciate your leadership, and I look forward to working alongside you to bring needed reform to our diplomatic strategy. We certainly have a lot of work to do, and this hearing is just the beginning. Accountability is coming. Thank you also to our witnesses today. The corruption going on behind USAID's doors has been a wake-up call for all Americans. As chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, I spent the last 2 years exposing the Biden administration's sabotage of our border and the policies that kept America safe. I saw firsthand their willful refusal to protect this country. Under the guise of foreign aid, USAID has been an unapologetic front for a far-left agenda. It has become self-evident there weren't a handful of foolish policies, but rather a coordinated strategy of radical, idiotic, and often anti-American priorities. Idiotic, you say? Millions to teach Moroccans how to make pottery? The Moroccans were making pottery before we were a country. This entire debate today and the crocodile tears from Democrats just goes to show what's wrong with this town. Not a single Democrat I've heard has expressed dismay at the many examples of crazy, wasteful spending. I don't understand the objection to a deep dive in how we spend our money, but perhaps it's the fact that over the last several weeks, a massive surge has occurred in the search for a criminal defense attorney. That probably says it all. 5 times in this city, any other city in the nation. I'd like to remind the committee that President Kennedy unilaterally created USAID through an executive order in 1961. Yet the President Trump, orders a momentary pause after winning a mandate for reform, and Democrats cry, "Constitutional crisis." This is after 4 years of reckless spending and unrepentant lawlessness from the Biden administration. I want the American people to understand how this works in Washington. As long as you're spending other people's money, no one bats an eye. But the second you want to save taxpayer dollars, the swamp cries wolf, or in this case, unprecedented constitutional crisis. This breathless, fake outrage from the left is utterly insane. And you know what the American people, you know they can see right through it. The generosity of Americans and the blessing of giving aid to others has always been one of our most valuable tools for diplomacy. The American people have a proud history of championing aid to our fellow man, but lawless bureaucrats have poisoned that goodwill. Many USAID programs are wasteful and actively sabotage our diplomatic relationships by forcing woke ideology on our partners. Just look at PEPFAR, a beacon of hope in the fight against HIV/AIDS, yet the Biden administration even weaponized this crucial program, jeopardizing lives and undermining our relationship with African nations. Under Administrator Powers, our message to Africa was explicit, as it was heinous. Abort your babies and violate your religious convictions, or we won't grant you life-saving aid. Let me be crystal clear to those who've been complicit in this betrayal. Firing those involved is just a start. We have a long way to go. And one last point. I want to correct the record on a couple of things. First, Elon Musk and the team that is working does not have access to personal data. They don't have access to your Social Security number. That is a lie. Elon Musk does have a security clearance. He has a top secret security clearance. By God, he makes the rockets for NASA. But the suggestion that he somehow can't be trusted to dig into how we're spending our money is nothing but a smokescreen to hide the corruption and the wasteful spending that has occurred there. And I am personally offended at the left's continued references to 19-year-olds and 21-year-olds in there doing work. There are 19-year-olds who have won the Medal of Honor defending this country. Just because you're 19 doesn't mean you're some child who can't be trusted. It is offensive. And if you're 19 years old out there, 20 years old, and you're serving this country, by God, your service matters. Keep serving. We thank you for that. It would appear that I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Amen. Representative Castro is now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just say that if you can find us a 19-year-old Medal of Honor winner who would love to serve in the U.S. government, we'd love to have him, rather than this 19-year-old who's a mystery man and got fired from his last job. As y'all hear a lot of angry, fire-breathing rhetoric coming from the other side, I want you to consider, as Americans, where we started the year. Our country, for all of the complaints and all of the anger, is still the most powerful, prosperous nation on earth, with the lowest unemployment rate in decades and a strong economy, where foreign aid represents about 1% of our total budget. And yet, Elon Musk and this administration's attempt to illegally shut down USAID and freeze ongoing foreign assistance programs has been met with support and applause from some of the world's worst authoritarians. Venezuelan Interior Minister and Nicolas Maduro's key lieutenant celebrated the Trump administration's actions in ending support to the Venezuelan opposition. In Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega's sons said that, quote, Trump turned off the faucet for terrorists when he shuttered USAID funding. Belarusian leader Lukashenko applauded the administration's decision to cut funding for, quote, the fugitive opposition. The opposition that for years Republicans have said they support, they have now abandoned. President Trump has abandoned. He cut off TPS for Venezuelans and betrayed the people of South Florida and sent them back to a man he says is dangerous, yet sent Rick Grinnell to handshake with. After this administration's halted funding to Cambodia to remove unexploded bombs that the United States dropped on their country years ago, China offered to move in and replace U.S. funding. China has offered to go do the job that we are no longer doing. What do you think that does for American diplomacy? What do you think it does for our reputation around the world? What do those people think of us that we won't help them take away the bombs that we dropped years ago? Similar celebrations have come from leaders in Russia, Iran, Hungary, Cuba, and other countries as we've cut support to democracy activists in these countries. Democracy activists. Republicans have been eager to accuse Democrats of, quote, abandoning our allies. The reality is that the Trump administration abandoned our allies everywhere, and it didn't even take a week. Donald Trump has abandoned those fighting for democracy in Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, and China. He's abandoned Taiwan, freezing security assistance to the island nation facing threats of invasion from China. Donald Trump abandoned our partners in Indonesia, Malaysia, Iraq, and other countries fighting terrorism with the support of USAID. He's abandoned the country of Jordan by freezing security assistance, abandoned millions of victims of HIV/AIDS supported by PEPFAR, and abandoned those suffering from malaria and TB. Donald Trump has also abandoned American citizens, American farmers that feed the world, whose produce is rotting in ports and warehouses, and our USAID professionals and families that he stranded abroad. Make no mistake, these decisions will come back to haunt the United States of America. And not only in terms of diplomacy, not only in terms of how people think of us in faraway lands, those diseases that we're no longer helping to cure, people will get sick not only in those countries, but in the United States. And I hope that just as folks are taking credit for what's going on now, that when those diseases hit the United States, that they will take full credit for that.